Modes Made Easy, Week 3. There were a lot of questions at the end of last week's course, and really all 2 weeks that we've been doing this, related to how modes and chords work and how you know which mode to use, and I guaranteed you that we would be getting into that stuff starting this week. It's a common misconception among people who are learning the modal positions that, just choose a mode. Just choose a mode. It doesn't work that way. The mode chooses you. The chord progression, what's going on in the chord progression chooses you, chooses the mode that's to be played. Unless it's a drone track or a single chord, then you can choose the mode. There are also very simple chord progressions, 2 chord progressions maybe, that you can also choose a mode. There are other scenarios too where in blues you could choose a mode, but for the most part, what the chord progression is doing, what the tonal center is, determines what the mode is going to be. So, with that in mind, we're going to look at key signatures today. We're going to look at major scale harmony, and we're going to look at chords in all keys so that we can start getting familiar with, that's the 5 chord in the key of whatever. This is going to be helpful for modes, and the progression that we're going to present these materials today is going to, I think, really solidify, or at least start to solidify, why the mode chooses you, why the chord progression determines the song. So, are there any comments and questions from last week? And if there are, I'm going to go ahead and just dive in upon asking that. I'm going to dive into the major scale harmony set of tabs. And if I need to be interrupted, totally fine.
No questions at the moment.
All right. Let's go to major scale harmony. Okay. So if you've taken my course before, if you've taken any of my courses, live courses before, you've probably seen this. But we need to review it. We need to review it because major scale harmony is the crux of modal harmony. It is modal harmony. So if we go here and we play the first tab, we have an out of tune C chord. We have a C. C is the tonal center. We're in the key of C, and this is the 1 chord based off of the first note. It's major. We have notes C, E, and G. All right, so if we move to the second note of C, D, would it then be D major? No. Why would it not be D major? It wouldn't be D major because we're introducing a note, an F sharp, that doesn't exist in C. If we stack thirds on top of the second note of a major scale, and we stay in the key of C, then it has to be D, F, A. So that puts us at a minor chord. We have C major, D minor, or C or major 1 chord, minor 2 chord. The same is true for all the chords all the way up. We're going to stack thirds on top of the roots of each scale degree, and we're going to realize that there is a certain major, minor, diminished thing that happens because when we stack thirds diatonically, meaning within the parent key, within the key, we create this. major 1, C, E, G, D, F, A, minor 2, going to the 3rd degree, which is E. If we stack thirds off of E in the key of C, we have E, G, and B. That gives us a minor 3. Major 1, minor 2, minor 3. The next note in the key of C is an F. If we stack thirds off of F, diatonic to C, we have F, A, and C. If we were to stack any other third or any other fifth on top of this, we would not be in the key. There's F. Now moving to G. Here we also have a major 5 chord. We also have a major chord. G, B, and D. We're stacking thirds diatonic in the key of C. So we have major 1, minor 2, minor 3, major 4, major 5. So important. Next, G to A. A is going to be minor, or 6 is always going to be minor. If we're talking about a major scale diatonic to the key of C. 7 is going to be diminished. And then finally we have 1. Again, so major 1, minor 2, minor 3, major 4, major 5, minor 6, diminished 7, back to 1. If you are dealing with purely a major scale, and if you are in the key of that major scale, and your tonal center is the same as the parent key, that is always the harmonic structure going up the scale. Major 1, minor 2 and 3, major 4 and 5, minor 6, diminished 7. One more time. Major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. Major 1, minor 2, minor 3, major 4, major 5, minor 6, diminished 7. A better way to think about it is 1, 4, 5 is always major, 2, 3, 6, always minor, and the odd guy out, the 7th, is diminished. 1, 4, 5 is major, 2, 3, 6, minor, and the odd one out is diminished, 7. Most of you probably have an understanding of that already, but I reviewed it again because it's extremely important when we look at what happens to the chord progressions in modes. So let's just look at a few major chord progressions here. 1, 4, 5, turn my delay off so it's not distracting here. 1, 4, 5, always major. In G, G, C, D, C, 6, 2, 5, 1, 4, 2, 5, 6, 4, 5. If you can number chords like that in any key, it's really, really going to help you out a ton. If this is new to you or fuzzy to you, please ask questions. But if you want a whole series on how to approach harmony major scale harmony in particular, check out the live course I did last year called Rhythm and Harmony. And we talk a lot about how to hear the numbers and how to get acclimated to the number system. It's really, really handy. And I mean, I don't know how I would do modes without it. Okay, so key of D, 1, 4, 5, 6, 4, 1, 5, 4, 1, 5, 6, 4, 1, 5. Pretty cool. And we'll get into this, we'll get into more keys in a little bit here. So if we take chord harmony off of any single note and we call it the 1 and we stack thirds all the way up, we have that same major scale harmony. Major 1, 4, and 5 chords, minor 2, 3, and 6 chords, diminished 7. So if we're building off of a D note, and D is the tonal center, and D is the key, let me say that again. D is the tonal center, and D is the key, and we're building major scale harmony off of D, then we know that it's going to be the same chord harmony built off of D that it was off of C. Regardless of what key you're in, if you're playing in the major scale and your tonal center is the same as your parent key, you have that chord harmony makeup. Does that make sense so far? There's a delay, so we'll wait if there's any questions here. I want to make sure that anybody who has issue or is a little bit fuzzy on this gets a chance to ask, because we're going to go a little further with this here in a second.
All right, got one question here.
Yeah.
This is from Daryl over on Facebook, and he's wanting to know, what has this to do with modes?
Oh, you'll see in just a moment. We're about to crack open the secret of, it's not really a secret, but a lot of people don't really approach it this way. We're going to show you what major scale harmony has to do with finding what mode you should be playing. The chords and the chord progression determine the modes.
Other than that, I have someone that's following, so I think we're not getting anything else, so everybody must be tracking, hopefully.
All right. Okay, so let's go now to the key signature chart. And let's look here. Let's just briefly review this and build a case for why this is so useful. So we just built major scale harmony off of C. C has no sharps or flats. When you see accidentals here, they're not accidentals, they are intentionals. What it's basically saying is, in the key of A, if we want to build a major scale, a pure, true major scale off of A, to preserve the sound of the major scale, it will require 3 sharps. Since the order of sharps is F, C, G, fat cows, go dancing at every ball, F, C, G, D, A, E, B, we know that those 3 sharps are F, C, and G. So to build a major scale and harmony off of the major scale, we need to play F, C, and G sharps as opposed to regular F, C, and Gs. Same goes for any one of these keys. This is, so it's good to memorize this, But it's good to understand the need for the sharps and flats. Why does the key of A need 3 sharps? It needs 3 sharps so that it sounds like a major scale. If we didn't have those 3 sharps, F, C, and G in A, it would sound like a minor scale because the interval relationships between the notes would be different. We get sharps and flats in the names of the notes basically from the piano. The black keys are the sharps or flats. And this is important to understand when we go to building chord progressions off of modes. Okay, just had to get that out of the way. I think for most people, understanding the need and building a case for the key signature chart is good. The order of sharps, F, C, G, D, A, E, B. Father Charles goes down after every battle or at every battle, or fat cows go dancing at every ball. The order of flats, it's always reversed. B, E, A, D, G, B, E, A, D, G, C, F. And so I have always said B, greatest common factor. That is the way I remember it, even though it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Okay, now we're going to get into modal harmony. Let's do the key transposition chart here. Okay, so what this does is it lays out every key and the names of the chords that lie on each scale degree. So if we look at C, we have the one chord is major. One chord's always major. You can see up top that the uppercase Roman numerals mean major, the lowercase Roman numerals mean minor, and of course the lowercase with the little O sign is diminished. So in the key of C, we have C major, D minor, E minor, F, G, A minor, B. So if you were playing a 1, 4, 5 in the key of C, you would have C, F, and G. Okay. Let's skip down to D major. If we were to play a chord progression based off the 1, 4, and 5 in the key of D, it would be D, G, and A. Following? Okay, now let's build a chord progression in D Dorian. You have to follow me here. We're going to build a chord progression in D Dorian using this table. This is going to be cool. We do not want to go down to where it says D is in the 1 column. We know that Dorian is the second mode of the major scale. So we're going to build off of where we see D in the second position, that second column. Where do we see it? We see it in C. So D Dorian would be placed on the second degree of the C major scale. D Dorian's parent key is C because the 1 chord where we're placing it is the major scale that D Dorian is derived from. If we want to play a chord progression in D Dorian, if we want to play a 1, 4, 5 chord progression in Dorian, we have to look at it as, for a moment, we have to look at it as 2, 5, 6 from the key of C and shift it. So our 1, 4, 5 in Dorian is going to be D minor, G major, A minor. So a Dorian chord progression, if we're looking at the 1, 4, 5, has a minor 1. We're shifting the numbers now. We're calling Dorian the 1. D Dorian, that's the tonal center in the parent key of C. Because it's in the parent key of C and we're sticking to major scale harmony to get these sounds, the 2 becomes a 1, D becomes the 1. The 1, 4, 5 chord progression in the key in D Dorian is going to be 1 minor, 4 major, 5 minor. Let me say that again. In Dorian, in D Dorian, we have D minor, G major, A minor. Now, because we're sticking with major scale harmony all the time throughout this course, well, until we get to blues, but for now, we're in major scale harmony, we can be confident that the 1-4-5 in D Dorian, the 1-4-5 in Dorian period, is minor 1, major 4, minor 5. We can go further, but let's get our head around that sound a little bit. D minor. Major 4. I went to the minor 5 there. Our tonal center is D minor. We have a major 4 chord and a minor 5 chord. This is what drives the choice of modes. You're listening to a song, and it's clearly in a minor key, but as you're listening, you hear some major chords in there. And if you can identify the numbers of that chord progression by listening to it, maybe you have to grab your guitar, and you hear something that is a minor 1 chord with a major 4 chord and a minor 5 chord, you are more than encouraged, you should play Dorian over that chord progression. Now, we can look at the rest of the chord harmony in C with relative to D Dorian, and we find some other coolnesses. If we're in D Dorian, the parent key of C, that makes C the 7th tone of D Dorian. And if you guys have been working on your exercises, that should make sense, working on your scales. So the C is the 7th tone of D Dorian. What that means is if we're playing in D, we've got a minor 1, we've got a major 7 chord, a whole step away from the root. So we've got a major 4, so we've got this is where it really sounds good. Let's watch this. We put the emphasis on the D minor using that C. We'll get more into chord progressions and stuff like that on weeks 4 and 5. We're doing basically major chord progressions, basically minor chord progressions, and we're going through all sorts of kind of cool. I mean, it'll basically be this, but we're going to talk specifically about chord progressions and then playing over them. So, does this make sense? What we've done is we have unveiled, we have shown how you derive what the chords do within a given mode by looking at pure major scale harmony. We're going to go through all the modes doing this, and so how is it How are we doing on the understanding level? Do we have anybody crossing their eyes?
Well, no comments or questions, which you can interpret that however you want. Could be good, could be bad. So, yeah, if you guys have questions, let's get them in or let us know if you're tracking with us here.
All right, let's go back to the key transposition table. If there's any questions, I'm interruptible. Let's do Dorian in a different key. Let's do A Dorian. That's a pretty common key. So A Dorian would be in the parent key. We can see Dorian is the second mode of the major scale. So we're going to look and find, and we know it's a minor mode, so we're going to look and find A minor in the 2 column. A Dorian is the parent key of G. And the 1, 4, 5 there it is a 1 minor, 4 major, 5 minor, because we're shifting the numbers. So we have A minor to D major, E minor. And then our 7, a whole step away from the root, is a G major. And then, of course, there are other, you have a major 3 chord, and you have a minor 2 chord. So those are some other things that you can have fun with. But because our Western music, our American music, for the most part, is built around that 1, 4, 5 root movement, the 1, 4, 5 is the best place to start. So we would have A minor, D major, G, a whole step away from the root, G major, and you can hear, especially there, because we've gone over this pentatonic modal. There's that natural 6 that we talked about with Dorian, and you can see it very evidently in this position. A minor, major 4, D major, there it is. The D major houses that natural 6 that is the key tone of Dorian. Let's do, and you could go here, so F Dorian, or G Dorian. G Dorian is another common one, parent key of F. The 1, 4, 5 would be G minor to C major to D minor. We can go to another common key that people like to play in is E Dorian. Where's E Dorian? That'd be the parent key of D. 1, 4, 5, E minor, A major, B minor. Yes.
Got a couple questions here.
Oh, good.
I got another one from Daryl.
Okay.
I thought modes were about notes, not keys.
Oh, they're about both, man. If they were just about notes, we wouldn't know what to play. You have to be attentive to what the chord progression is doing and why. If you can see why and hear why a chord progression might be doing something, if you have a minor 1 to a major 4 chord, because we've been talking about Dorian, if you hear that, you know that you can pull out all the notes, all the patterns that you know in D Dorian, for example, and play in the Dorian mode. But so many people make the mistake of just arbitrarily choosing a mode, and the notes that they play aren't sweet. They're not truly fitting. For example, if I play this chord progression I was just playing, and I try to play a straight A minor sound over it, that's going to sound like this. I missed an opportunity. That's a regular 6. We want the raised 6, right? That just doesn't sound right. So they're all the same thing. You have to know a little bit about keys. You obviously have to know Dorian patterns, which is what we've been working on, not only the past 2 weeks, but the 10 weeks before that, when we were looking at 3 and a string scales. But if you check out the first 2 weeks of this series, you see that we are explaining how the patterns that we learned in the first series pertain directly to each mode. And then we also talk about how to modify each pentatonic scale. So modes they're about notes, they're about keys, they're about tonal centers, key signatures, chord progressions. Having an understanding of all these things will help you apply the modes that you maybe already know in a very musical way.
Okay, this question is about the diminished chord. So the diminished chord does not move?
Oh, it does. It absolutely does. Go back to the key transposition table here. So if we were to look at D Dorian in the key of C, our 7th tone would be C if we're in D Dorian, because the 2 becomes the 1, so the 1 becomes a 7. We would have a B diminished. We'd have a diminished 6 in the key in Dorian. Has a diminished 6. And generally, when we're talking about modes, wherever the diminished goes, that would be considered the avoid tone. Not that you can't play it at all, but that by choosing a chord, choosing to play a diminished 6 chord in a Dorian key would make your ear want to go back to the parent key. It would make it want to go back to C. We don't want that. We want D, we want the Dorian, we want the 2, what is the 2 chord in the parent key, or the 1 that we're calling our tonal center. We want that to be the focus. Then we'll be in that mood, in that mode. But if you ever play the diminished chord anywhere, so in Dorian it would be a diminished 6. In Phrygian it would be a diminished 5 chord. See that? You're just backing it up 1. So in Phrygian you want to stay away from playing the 5 chord, because the 5 chord is going to point back to the parent key, which we don't want the parent key to be the tonal center if we're intentionally trying to play modally. Hope that makes sense.
Okay, and this is a kind of a statement / question from VVLZ.
Yeah.
It happens so that the song I'm currently learning is in E Dorian most of the time. The 6th is never accentuated there, so I just thought maybe the chords determine the mode?
Absolutely, the chords determine the mode. And you might hear the 6th in the melody, maybe. Maybe they aren't accentuating the 6th, the natural 6th, so much. The chord progression is what determines the mode, unless it's a static chord. It's cool that you were able to hear that was in E Dorian. So let's go back and look at E Dorian. E Dorian is in the key, the parent key of D major. So in E Dorian, you'd have E minor. The 1-4-5 would be A major, B minor. Good. Good observation.
Okay, one more question here.
Mm-hmm.
So are you playing the same mode throughout the entire chord progression, or do you change the mode every time you change chords?
Good question. We play the same mode throughout the chord progression so long as the group of chords or the chord progression that we're looking at remains the same. You don't switch modes every chord. Now that is true for diatonic chord progressions. Diatonic chord progressions meaning you're sticking to the major scale. You might switch modes, but that's only because the chord progression will switch, or the tonal center might switch. But for a diatonic chord progression like we're talking about, you will stay in that mode. You will not switch a mode every chord. Switching the mode every chord and just thinking about that in general is extremely inefficient, and it draws attention away from what it makes you play more scalier and less melodically, I think. Whereas if you look at the chord progression as a whole and you determine the mode that will work based on what the chord progression is doing, you are able to seize opportunities with the key tones that we discussed a lot in the first 2 weeks, and we'll be discussing more. So this is it's a big topic. That's a good question. A lot of people do think that, oh, I'm playing over the 5 chord, so I need to use Mixolydian. Well, is the 5 chord the tonal center? That's what's your tonal center? Your tonal center and the chords surrounding it are going to determine your mode. Here's an example. Let's say I'm playing this. Well, those chords go by pretty fast. If I'm improvising, do I want to be thinking in my mind, G Ionian, C Lydian, D Mixolydian? No. You want to be thinking G major, or even better, you want to be thinking G major pentatonic. I only got 5 notes to worry about. Same thing here. A Dorian. Something's going by that fast. A is clearly the tonal center. We don't want to think A Dorian, G Ionian, because again, that's not the tonal center. And then, well, this is the 4 chord in Dorian. Would it be the 4? This is 4 chord in Dorian is the 5 chord in the parent key. So wait, it just gets so confusing when you try to switch modes all the time. So let the chord progression determine it. Now, in jazz fusion and jazz and where you're having modulate in blues, when you're having modulating happening within the chord progression, which we're going to get to in weeks 8, 9, and 10, then you do have to make some decisions. You have to look, again, you look at the chord progression, you look at the chords involved, and you go, oh, okay, well, we're going from this chord to this chord. The tonal center is actually changing. Therefore, the mode is going to change. Whenever the tonal center changes, the mode changes, not whenever the chord changes. There's a lot more to unpack here, but I hope that at least partially makes sense. But it's a very common question.
Okay, I think we can keep going here.
Okay. Okay, cool. Let's look at Phrygian. So if we're going to be in E Phrygian, oops. What do we have that shows us that we're in Phrygian? It's kind of cool. We have a 1, a 4, and a 5. We're going to be in C major, parent key of C major. So that means that our 3 chord becomes our 1. So our 1, 4, 5 is E minor, A minor, B diminished. So we don't want to play the 5 chord if we can avoid it. But we have a kind of a cool thing happening here. We have E minor to A minor, which if we just go back and forth there, sounds like a regular old minor progression. But if we look at the 2 and the 3 in Phrygian, E minor, F major, G major. So 1 minor, 2 major, 3 major. We have minor. Really cool sound. And depending on your rhythm, you can really solidify tonal center is E minor, and we are playing around with the chords available to us within the major key in order to give us a certain sound. And if you hear something like that, if you hear a minor 1 and a chord really close to the root that's a major, you might be in Phrygian. I mean, you hear stuff like this in songs all the time. That could be Locrian too, but because that has the same relationship. But so that's an example of Phrygian. And you could take it. It doesn't matter what key. Let's go to you want to play in. Let's see, G Phrygian. That would be in the key of E flat. Our 1-4-5 would be G minor, C minor, D diminished. So we've got G and C. But we have A flat and B flat as our 2 and our 3. Now we're not completing chord progressions here, and that's okay. Next week, what we're actually going to do with basically major chord progressions, we're going to look at the Ionian mode, the Dorian, or the Ionian mode, the Lydian mode, and the Mixolydian mode, and we're going to just record basic chord progressions and then react to them using the scale patterns that we've learned so far. So, okay. Any questions or comments before we move on to Lydian?
No questions right now.
Okay. Lydian. Let's go back to the key transposition table. Lydian is the fourth mode of the major scale. This one's cool. They're all cool. Lydian, what we have to do is we have to call the 4 the 1, and then look at the harmony based on that. So we have 1, 4, 5 in F Lydian, which would be the parent key of C. Our 4 is our sort of a void chord, would be B diminished. And our 5 chord is C. Something cool about the Lydian mode, though, is that it has a major 1 and a major 2 chord. This is a very, very common thing you'll hear. So if we have, if we're in F Lydian, and you're clearly here. So let's go, we have a major 5 too. So we've established that this is the 1. It's a really common sound. This is most commonly done in A Lydian. Let's look at where A lands in. So A Lydian would be in the parent key of E major. You can see it down there under, it's the 4 of E major. It's the fourth mode of the E major scale. So our 1-4-5 is A, D diminished, E major. Our 2 chord, our major 2 chord is B. So if we have this open, something like this. If you have something happening like that, you know you're in Lydian. A major 1 with a major 2 chord. That's really great with open strings. You know, people like to do D. Now, a lot of times you'll hear songs that are in modulating Lydian, and this would be a case where you'd want to evaluate what happens to the tonal center and change modes accordingly. But if we have, let's say your chord progression does this. Pretty common sound. There, you would want to be thinking, okay, well, over the A and the B, I'm playing A Lydian, and then I am modulating to D Lydian over the D and the E major chords. So that would be one way to look at it. And we'll get into more of that stuff in a little while. Okay. Anybody's head hurting? This is a...
Got a question here.
Yes.
All right, this is from Gamma Sign.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is it common to use a major 1 chord even though it should be minor in Phrygian, like Malagania?
Right.
It's often said to be Phrygian even though the 1 chord is major.
Yeah, that is... when you have a major 1 chord in Phrygian, that's one of those things that they do. It is... I believe that when you have a major 1 chord, it is actually considered the key of Phrygian dominant, which we're not going to get into that. It is a derivative of like how the harmonic minor works, which is just something that composers and Western music has said we can do, and so our ears are used to it. But you're absolutely right. The Phrygian sound is characterized by sort of this sound too. If you go back and you look at the major scale harmony, let's go back to E Phrygian. So E Phrygian would be in the parent key of C. But if we make the E major, we are basically saying in the key of C that the 3 chord is major, which sometimes you hear. Sometimes you hear something like this. Let's see. Sounds kind of cool. So we're going to talk more about exceptions in Quick on Your Feet and how to deal with those things, how to deal with thinking about your melodies and thinking about your scale. Because the question will come up, well, wait, if Phrygian is supposed to be a minor 1, but I hear a major 1, how do I play the Phrygian scale over it? Because when I play this, when I play this relationship, that doesn't sound right over that chord. So we'll get to that in more detail in week 9. We'll be talking about more of those things. Good question.
That's all the questions right now.
Okay, Mixolydian. Mixolydian is a fun one. We have so what we're doing is this is the major 5 major, and so if we're looking at the key of C, G Mixolydian would be in the parent key of C, and our 1-4-5 would be G, C, and D, G major, C major, D minor. Kind of a cool sounding thing there. But one of the key differentiators here is that we've got, like Dorian, we have a major chord a whole step away from the 1, if we're calling G the tonal center. So we have, if we're in the key of G Mixolydian, you might hear something like this. Pretty cool sounding. Let's go to D Mixolydian. Oops, I dropped my pick. D Mixolydian. Let's find that. D Mixolydian would be in the key of, it'd be in the parent key of G. Our 1-4-5 would be D, G, A minor. And our major 7 chord, a whole step away from the root, would be C. This is kind of neat. So let's, we'll go 1, major 1 to minor 5 is another dead giveaway that you're in a Mixolydian key, Mixolydian tonality. 5. There's our 4 chord. You can hear melodies soaring over that. Da, 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 da. Oh. There's our 7 away from the root. You even go to the 7th chord there between the 5 chord. Cool stuff. Mixolydian is a very natural, the chords work well around one another. Okay, the 6th degree, A minor. This is the minor mode. This is straight minor. And so this is where it becomes really apparent. Let's look at the minor harmony. 1, 4, 5 here would be A minor, then D minor, E minor. We've still got a major 7 chord, a whole step away from the root, so we've still got this sort of thing going on. Just like in Dorian, but here we're going to go to a minor 4 sound. That's the more common straight relative minor sound. And then diminished. Man, since the diminished is the avoid tone, Locrian is tough, and it's hardly ever used when you're talking about chord progressions, because when you hear a diminished chord, you so badly want to go back to the one that it came from. So typically, diminished chord progressions, it's a 1 chord sort of thing. You might have you have a whole step away from the root if you're a diminished. So you might have, if we're talking about B diminished, you might have something like this. That would be about it in terms of stuff that sounds, it's truly Locrian. But there are opportunities to go in and out of Locrian, which we'll get into more later, but this is a lot to digest, a lot to digest. So how do we practice this? How do we, it's really about getting familiar with each key. Each key's primarily 1, 4, and 5, but what makes up the chord harmony of each key? Be comfortable saying, in the key of G major, I've got G, C, and D as my 1, 4, and 5. 6 is my minor, it's E. A is my 2 minor. B is my 3 minor. Be able to list them out of order. Be comfortable with it. Be able to play it. The key of A. Okay, well, my 1, 4, 5 in the key of A major is A, D, and E. And my minor, my relative minor, my minor 6 is F sharp minor. That kind of thing. And then, for now, take it to the transposition table. G Mixolydian. Well, G is the 5, because we know that Mixolydian is the 5th mode of a major scale. G is the 5 of what key? G is the 5 of C. Okay, so G Mixolydian is going to have the same key signature as C major, no sharps, no flats. So the 1-4-5 in G, based on the key transposition table, or based on the fact that I just know my intervals, is going to be G, C, D minor. Get familiar with this, study the key transposition table, quiz yourself, spend a lot of time here because it's going to be very beneficial. When you're hearing songs on the radio or on Spotify, or you're playing a group of songs with your band, and you hear something that happens in a chord progression, if you're familiar with this stuff, you're going to be able to react as a lead guitar player and go, oh, I know what to do there. That's a Mixolydian sound, or that's clearly Dorian. Especially, if you can seize the opportunity in Dorian and Mixolydian and Lydian to really use those tones, it's pretty awesome. That's all the time. Well, it's not all the time we have necessarily, but it's all the content I have for this week. Are there any questions or comments before we go?
We've got one question here.
Okay.
So if anybody else has one, you got a few seconds here to get one in. But this one's from Callum. Hi, Chris. I take it the focus of this on this course is using the 7-pattern 3-note per string system rather than the 5-pattern cage system, or does it matter which system we use? Hope you understand where I'm coming from.
We are touching on both. We are primarily using the 3 per string system, but we are touching on the pentatonic, one of the pentatonic scales. Yes, we are focusing on the 3 string system primarily, but for a lot of the stuff we're doing, if you're comfortable with the modes presented in the caged fashion, this is still golden. We're learning how to play modally using whatever scale pattern. We're looking at the chord progressions and the major scale theory behind it, so that we can hear something and immediately go, I know what mode to use. Good question.
Okay. Looks like that's going to be all the questions we have.
Cool. All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week for basically major chord progressions, where we're going to record live right here. We're just going to record some basic chord progressions modally, and then react to them with the scales that we know. We're going to come up with melodies. It's going to be a fun time. So we've got 3 modes that we're working with next week: Ionian, Lydian, and Mixolydian. Basically major chord progressions. We'll see you there.